Computer. Well, I'm still not sure if I know, but we've got some new iPads, baby. Apple just unveiled a whole slew of new devices at its latest iPad event, held just a few hours ago. They announced a whole bunch of stuff, but the headliner was certainly the new lineup of iPad Pros, that somehow got significantly lighter, thinner, brighter, more powerful, and a bit more expensive as well. Besides that, they also addressed some things that I actually complained about last week, which I must mean they're listening to me. I'm very honored. Let's go through the announcements one by one and what they mean for the future of the iPad and maybe for the future of Apple. The iPad Air started out, is it more than a decade ago now, as the more portable alternative to the regular iPad, and with the iPad Pro it's kind of the middle of the pack model. The issue was for people looking for a bigger screen that there was no large screen model other than the top of the line iPad Pro, which cost a lot of money. And for most people who wanted a larger screen, well, they kind of had to go to the iPad Pro, which was either more expensive or last generation. That's no longer the case now that the new 13-inch iPad Air has come out. That's, I think, the main selling point for this year's generation of the iPad Air, though it does come with a more powerful processor, a side-mounted camera for, well, when you're mounting your iPads, with a keyboard, and also an upgrade to the display. It's the same display that was in the last generation of the iPad Pro, which was a gorgeous display, so that's really cool. All in all, the iPad Air is probably the most important model of their lineup that they've released, given the more accessible price and the Pro features that most people won't actually focus on. There's no reason for anyone like my mother, who I interviewed last week, to go for something like an iPad Pro with this current generation. So they're definitely, well, maybe shooting themselves in the foot by making it accessible for a lower price, but it's definitely a more compelling product now that they have these two versions of it. Also worth noting is the mentions of AI, as in like artificial intelligence versus machine learning. Apple has been quite sneaky about mentioning, well, not using the term AI in the past, preferring to use machine learning and more technical terms. But it seems that that's kind of shifted in the past couple of keynotes. So last keynote they had 3 mentions of AI. This keynote they had 8 mentions of AI, which is a 2.6 times increase. So I only can imagine what's going to happen at the WWDC coming next month. It's basically just last generation's iPad Pro, but converted to a lower price, more attractive pastel colors, and all the Pro features that were not really necessary weeded out. So for someone like my mother, who I interviewed last week on my episode about her use of the iPad, she's only been using an iPad for the past 10 years, I would definitely go for that iPad Air versus basically any other model. Especially given that it has the same chip as last generation's iPad Pro, so it's nothing we haven't heard of before, but this M2 chip is more than powerful enough to, well, probably power your iPad for the next 10 years. Alright, speaking of which, let's move on to the iPad Pro and its thickness, or rather, thinness. So we're going for the 11-inch model from a thickness of 5.9 millimeters to 5.3, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually a huge amount, given how thin the iPad already was. And for the 13-inch model, which is basically the same as the 12.9-inch model from last generation, it's kind of scary because they've gone from 6.4 millimeters to 5.1 millimeters. It kind of makes you wonder how they got it that thin, and the first element is the screen. So this is the first iPad to use an OLED display. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically a difference between LCD, where you have a backlight like the light that I have behind me, shining through a filter, and the computer is deciding, okay, I'm going to show this pixel here, through selectively blocking the light, versus OLED, where the pixels are directly emitting the light. So not content to have a single layer OLED screen, Apple went for a dual layer OLED screen, which allows them to have a much higher brightness and, according to them, much better power, given the fact that they've put it into this iPad. So this looks like something that could really change the tablet space going forwards in the next couple of years. How other manufacturers of tablets implement this dual OLED technology could mean the difference between them having comparatively thick tablets compared to Apple's much lighter weight ones. This is a live stream that has many firsts, so not only the first device to have a dual layer OLED screen, but also the first Apple iPad product to come out with the latest series of chips before it's announced on any other product. So they've announced the new M4 chip before it even gets into the Mac lineup or any of the other devices, which is a big deal. It shows how serious they are about the iPad after kind of letting it to linger in the past year. And the M4 is a pretty significant upgrade compared to the M2 that was in the last generation. For context, they skipped last year's iPad, so they didn't update anything in the last year. So these iPads were long overdue for an update. And it's interesting to see that they went directly for the M4 instead of just giving them the M3 and being content with slightly lower performance. For given the explanations that they showed during the video, it seems that that was kind of necessary for it to be as efficient as it needed to be to fit into this much slimmer chassis. So they're saying that the power between the M2 to the M4 is a bump of 50%, which is significant, but in line with what we've seen from the M2 to the M3 and M3 to the M4. The more significant change, according to them, is the fact that the M4 is able to run at the same level of performance as the M2 at half of the power, which, once again, helps justify somewhat how the iPad got so much thinner. There's lots of other features in the M4 from the GPU that allows you to actually play quite high-level games on an iPad. Maybe it's going to turn into a gaming tablet. That's quite exciting, especially given the high-quality screen and the fact that you can like prop it up like a Nintendo Switch if you take a controller with you. So that's a really exciting future, actually, which brings the iPad so much closer to filling the role of a regular computer. Right? And if you're able to do games on it in addition to all the rest of the things that we're presenting, it becomes quite compelling. They're really focusing on AI features that can run locally on device. So, for example, removing backgrounds from videos in Final Cut Pro, which still doesn't exist in the Mac version of Final Cut Pro. So I'm very excited to see what it looks like on the iPad and when it comes to the regular Mac. But yeah, the iPad Pro is such an interesting new release, given the savings that they're making in terms of weight, in terms of thickness, in terms of power efficiency. It's definitely going to be quite interesting to professionals, especially given the integrations that they've given it. So they're saying that it's 4 times faster than your iPad Pro with M2, which is a cherry-picked metric, but still quite impressive, especially given their focus on professional apps. So for me, as someone who makes media, I'm mostly interested in Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro, but there's modeling apps that are coming to the iPad, which I have absolutely no knowledge about how good they actually are, how fully featured they are, so I'll have to look into that. For Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro, they released an iPad version of those apps just last year, and coming out with a new version which has some new interesting features and solves one of the big issues that I was complaining about in my video last week. So one thing that they've solved, which I had a problem with, was external project support. So the way that it was currently run was that you had to have your project on your iPad itself, but if it was too big or if it exceeded the storage capacity of your iPad, then you were kind of out of luck. You had to transfer some footage out or go onto a regular Mac to actually work properly on it. Now you're able to have external projects on an SSD, which means that you don't have to have an iPad that has a whole terabyte of storage. If you have a base model iPad, then you're probably fine, which is quite cool. They've also introduced a new feature, which is the wireless multicam, which allows you to string together footage from several, let's say, iPhones and iPads that you have strewn around in your studio for multicam shoots, and integrate them directly into Final Cut Pro. So I'm quite curious to get my hands on that. I'll be doing a demo as soon as the update comes to, where my location is. But they've also come out with a new application for controlling your iPhone's camera. So they've called it Final Cut Camera, which is the application that allows you to stream to that multicam, but you can also use it standalone. So this is quite exciting because the default app for photos on the iPhone and for video doesn't really give you any fine control. So you just have some exposure adjustments, but this could be kind of a missing link that you would want in a Final Cut workflow if you're using your iPhone professionally. That's Final Cut Pro for the iPad. I'm really excited to see what it looks like when it comes out and to be able to play around with that multicam editor. It looks super interesting. They've also added some features to Logic Pro, which go from, well, extended AI-generated backing tracks to AI-generated filters. So kind of an AI push in this direction. For Logic, I'm not the biggest user of Logic, so I can't actually comment on it too much, but it definitely looks like it's an interesting tool, new tool in the belt of people who actually use Logic professionally. So moving on, we have a new Magic keyboard, which serves to kind of go into this idea that, well, the iPad is a computer. They're trying to make it seem much closer to the Mac with function keys and a trackpad that's quite similar to the trackpad that you can see on the Mac with haptic feedback when you're clicking on it. So yeah, it definitely feels like they're a bit more serious about the Mac now, which is a relief. I mean, yeah, they abandoned it for a whole year, basically with leaving people to speculate that, yeah, maybe they weren't taking it that seriously. But yeah, seeing this new lineup, it definitely feels like they haven't abandoned it and they're going all in, especially given the new Apple Pencil. So with a new squeeze gesture that you can squeeze and roll in specialized applications. For example, Procreate, which they had the Procreate team come on to explain how they had integrated it directly into their application. Yeah, I think the biggest things we learned was that Apple is renewing its commitment to the iPad. Given that it hadn't renewed any of its iPads in the past year, a lot of people were a bit concerned about them like kind of leaving it by the wayside and focusing only on the Vision Pro. But given the significant upgrades that we've seen today, it seems that it's still a core part of their strategy, and they're still trying to kind of bridge the gap between Mac and iPad while keeping them separate, which is fair enough. I mean, as I said last week, the iPad doesn't have to fully replace the MacBook, but it would be nice if it was able to do all the things that it does. And with the new upgrades to the processing power and to the applications, it's definitely one more step closer to reaching that goal of being able to do most of what you'd be able to do on the Mac. Well, obviously, there are still limitations. They still don't want you to sideload apps. They still don't want you to have full control over it like you would with a MacBook, but that's an issue for another day. Other than that, I mean, Apple's so good at product design and getting devices that feel right. So I can't wait to get my hands on the new iPad Pro 13-inch when it comes out to figure out, well, how light does it actually feel to hold it. And I think that's about it for this Apple iPad event. Yeah, it was really interesting to cover. It's very late now, so I need to edit this quickly and go and crash and sleep. But let me know if you have any thoughts. Make sure you catch our video that comes out once a week. And other than that, I think the only thing left to do is to take care